Welcome to the Hiding in Plain Sight podcast, where we explore the transformative power of inclusivity and the strength found in vulnerability. I'm your host, Lindsey Mazza, and with each episode, together we will go on a journey of reconnecting with all parts of ourselves to foster healing and inspire a more inclusive and compassionate world for all. So grab your headphones and settle in for soul-fulfilling discussions that will make you laugh, provoke thought, and be the catalyst for growth. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hiding in Plain Sight podcast. Today, I have Lauren Pires joining me, and I'm so excited for our chat. Lauren is an invisible disability speaker on resilience, joy, and owning who you are. She was named the #2 Inspirational Speaker of the Year in North America's largest inspirational speaking competition, Speaker Slam, in 2023. She is a D30 Disability Impact List honoree for Diversability 2024, You Look Good Inspiration Award winner, Visible Disabilities Association of 2023, and the only Invisible Disabilities Association ambassador in Canada. Lauren was born with central cord disease, a rare neuromuscular disorder. Although she lives with 33% strength of the average person, Lauren is known for her yay saying. Lauren has been featured on Breakfast Television, City News, Toronto, and RareDiseaseDay.org, Global News, and more. You can connect with her online, and I will put all the links in the show notes. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to dive in today. Lauren and I met organically through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is such a great platform to meet with people, who you have common interests and purpose with. So it's, if you're not on LinkedIn, I feel like people really are into Instagram over LinkedIn, but I found LinkedIn to be a really cool community.
Same. I've been getting more into it over the last year or two, and somehow I'm on there every day.
Yeah. So why don't we start with, given that the concept of my podcast is hiding in plain sight, why don't we start with you telling us about your journey for you really finding who you are and being able to show up in the world, all parts of you.
So as you mentioned, I was born with a rare muscle disorder, central cord disease, but I wasn't actually diagnosed until I was in my early 20s. And so for pretty much all my time growing up in elementary school, high school, about half of university, I knew that I had muscle weakness, but I didn't really know why. And I think partly because I didn't have a diagnosis, I never liked to talk about it. I didn't want to draw attention to things that were harder for me, things like walking up a flight of stairs or getting up from sitting on the ground or opening a heavy door. All the things that seemed normal for other people to be able to do were a lot harder for me than average, and I didn't want to stick out because of that. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I even heard from my neuromuscular specialist that I have 33% strength of the average person. And that was kind of shocking to hear after going my whole life just thinking, oh, I have muscle weakness, but I don't really know where I fall on the scale of things. And then in my early years, I found the Speaker Slam community, which is North America's largest inspirational speaking competition. And I was in the community for a year and a half or so, just as an audience member. And every so often, a speaker with a disability would take the stage and talk about their experience. And I was like, we can do that? Like, we can talk about our disabilities? Like, the concept I had never, ever thought of sharing about mine, because I only had a few close friends who knew. I would try to hide it as much as possible. But when the speakers who also had disabilities were talking about theirs, I always felt really moved. And I never really saw the point of sharing or talking about mine because I was like, this is just my own kind of thing in my life. But hearing their stories, I was like, maybe that's the point. Maybe the way that they are sharing their stories and I feel really touched by it, maybe if I share mine, that can be that for somebody else. And so that's kind of how I started talking about it, was actually through a Speaker Slam speech. I spoke about it for the first time publicly, and that kind of changed my life.
Wow. And that was just in 2023.
That was, yes, I did my first kind of entry with it in the fall of 2022, and then did my next one really just to get more comfortable talking about my disability at all in 2023, and then happened to make it to the finals and become the #2 Inspirational Speaker of the Year.
Wow. So what did that look like for you then growing up, Lauren, not knowing, not having an official diagnosis? So, how did that impact your life's path in terms of, requiring accommodations? What was that like in school?
Yeah, I think it took me a while for myself at least as a child, to even realize that I had a disability. I just knew that things were harder for me and that I couldn't do what a lot of kids were doing. Like I couldn't jump off the ground at one point. I couldn't run at all. And I didn't really know why. And also because of my disability, I would tire more easily. Getting all my homework done at night was hard. Getting like through the day, like I used to have to take more days off for being sick or tired than the average kid, just because it was a lot to deal with on the amount of energy I had. And my mom, I know, had a lot of trouble getting the schools to understand. I think probably because we didn't have a diagnosis and didn't really know what the issue was to be able to tell them. We just knew, hey, I can't really do gym class. I can't really like always meet the deadlines of things. Even though the work that I would do, everything was fine, like the quality and everything was fine. The volume was kind of the issue. And so I definitely did feel, I think also because I didn't have any kind of disability representation when I was growing up, and I didn't really know anyone else who had a disability, it did feel kind of isolating and lonely to not only not know why I was the way I was, but also not see that in anyone else.
Yeah. So what did they say? Like, did they provide you with any explanation?
Yes, so when I was 12, I had my second muscle biopsy. I had my first when I was 10 days old, and that was inconclusive. I had my second when I was about 12, and they said it was a mitochondrial disorder, but didn't really say like a specific kind or name or anything. They just said it's mitochondria. And I thought, okay, well, everybody knows the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And so if something is wrong with mine, that makes sense, but I wouldn't have the same energy as everyone else. And then when I was 21, I switched to a new neuromuscular specialist, and he right away was like, there's no way it's a mitochondrial disorder. And I was like, what do you mean? Because that's the only thing I've had to hold on to for like 10 years or so. And that's when he did a third muscle biopsy and said, it's central core disease, which is a disorder where some of the mitochondria in your muscle cells is missing. So I think formerly when I was 12, they thought, oh, there's something wrong with the mitochondria, but that apparently was not the case. It's just that some of the mitochondria in my muscle cells is not there. And that is what causes the muscle weakness. So it was really exciting. It was really annoying at first to have that kind of switch up in diagnosis because I didn't know how long it would take to get re-diagnosed with something. But then when I had an actual name for it for the first time, that was really exciting because all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I had something to Google to be like, oh, this is what I have. This explains my body. And then I could find other people who have the same disease. I found a Facebook group of about 1,200 people or so who either have central core disease or have children who have it. And that was mind blowing because I never really thought that I would ever find or speak to anyone. And here there was already a group of people who understood like what my life was like. And so that felt like having that community was really important.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to me because it's so interesting, you saying that it wasn't until 2022 where you actually started to talk about it, but before the official diagnosis, you live so much of your life in this gray area of like, what is it you even talk about, right? Like, how do you even
Yeah.
articulate it? Because nobody even equipped you with the language to articulate the challenges that you were facing.
Yeah.
And did you require, because one of my passions is really just talking more openly about how not accessible and accommodating our world is. I'm curious if you could give insight into your experience, like going through school, since you didn't find out until you were in your 20s. Did you require accommodations in high school and university, and what did that look like for you?
It definitely did feel like a weird gray area, like you said,
Yeah.
because people would see me and like I don't use any mobility aids. And so people would see me and they think they wouldn't assume that I have any kind of disability. But as I mentioned, simple things like walking up a flight of stairs or getting up from sitting on the ground or like I couldn't carry stacks of textbooks the way that other students could. And so that kind of thing definitely did make me feel like I was sticking out. Even I think possibly I was more aware of it than anyone else was, but that was still definitely like part of the isolating part of the experience. In high school, I was At first, when I started high school, my school administration had planned for me to finish in 5 years. And so they had structured my classes within first year to accommodate a 5 year plan. But I had decided I don't want to do that. I really just wanted to graduate with my friends and go along. At the time, I think I had a very unhealthy internalized ableism kind of set of being normal. And it took me a really long time to realize that there is no normal. There's just us and what we do with what we've been given. But in high school, I really just wanted to fit in, as so many of us do. So I kind of pushed through my own 4 year plan, but I was exempt from gym because I wasn't physically able to run or climb or do any kind of gym related things. And I was given like an alternate way to complete it through workbooks and like health kind of related projects instead.
Yeah, and it's funny, because that's the life journey of, being different. All you want to do is be like everyone else. But what's so fascinating is that, the school administration probably, like, they certainly weren't the ones to tell you what you could and could not do in what period of time either, right? And that's the gap in the system is you have a bunch of people sitting around with obviously the best intent, right? To
Oh
help
yeah.
move the needle and accommodate. But if there isn't anybody sitting at the table who has dealt with a disability or requiring an accommodation, I'm not sure who's informing these conversations. And I think that that's the largest gap and continues to be to this day when we're talking about accessibility, right? And making alternate arrangements for people is those who have walked the walk and had the lived experience are not included in the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was something I felt back then because the school administration, obviously, they did have the best intentions and wanted to make things easier for me, but nobody asked me whether I wanted to do high school in 5 years versus four. It was just kind of planned that way, and I had to kind of go against the plan. And I can see the other side of like not having that offer or opportunity and having a disability and trying to make myself fit into the 4 year plan. But I think the ideal situation is, like you mentioned, just collaboration with the person who has a lived experience and saying, well, what do you think you want to do, or how do you want to proceed, and making those decisions together.
Yeah, exactly. And also being flexible. I think the inflexibility is really dangerous as well because how are you supposed to know? Like, how old are you when you start high school, right? It has to be like a trial and error and let's pivot when we need to sort
Mhm.
of approach. But the infrastructures and systems aren't built that way. So, all you knew was that, I want to graduate with my friends. And so there was obviously a middle ground that they could have come up with for you. So you didn't have
Mhm.
to, exist in the same container and push yourself. And then what did university then look like for you? Because I know for me, high school to university was like it was a totally different ball game in terms
Mhm.
of they have the accessibility centers set up, but a university campus in and of itself is not accessible,
Mhm.
right? Because
Uh,
it's usually like the geographical footprint of it is it's
mhm.
very large. I went to McMaster, so like the parking lot to the main building, like you got to take a shuttle, carry all your stuff. Like there's really not a lot of thought. I mean, it's been a while since I've been in university around that stuff. So, what was your experience?
Yeah, well, that accessibility question was actually the one of the main reasons that I picked the university that I did go to, the University of Guelph Humber. I had picked it because it was all one building. It was 4 floors, and all of the classes were in the same building, and it was a pretty small university at that time. I think they may have added a building or two now on the campus of Humber College, the North Campus. And so Humber itself was very large and sprawling and had a lot of different places, but all of my classes were in the same building. And that made a really big difference to me to not have to navigate like across a campus to get places. So accessibility really drives like everything. Like that was I knew that I didn't want to be in classes of like 600 people and have to walk across one area to another to go to a bookstore or to eat or anything. And so that really helped the fact that it was more accessible than the average university. I did have, I think, some form of accommodations, but I never wanted to use them because, of course, that would be saying that I have a disability or admitting it, which at the time I was very against. And so even though I was able to take advantage of them, a lot of the time I didn't, or I would decide too late that, okay, I actually do need to do this. I have a class that I took in first year that I failed purely because I didn't take advantage of the accommodation of a deadline extension that I was offered and realized, okay, by not submitting this essay, I had asked for an accommodation too late, and my prof wouldn't accept it at the time. I still completed the essay, even though I knew I was going to fail the class, because I was like, for me, I still want to know that I did it. But if I had kind of worked with what I was already allowed to work with, that wouldn't have happened.
Listening to you talk really reflects how not in tune I was with myself
Mm.
as a student because I don't know how old are we allowed? Am I allowed to ask that? How old you are?
I'm 35.
Okay, so I'm 37. So we're
Okay.
like, that the accommodation scene would have been the same for both of us. But I
Mhm.
didn't even think about my university experience in terms of it all being in the one building. Like that wasn't even
Mhm.
on my radar.
It was really rare at that time. I think like very few universities have that as an option at all.
But was that self-driven for you, or did you have like a guidance counselor, someone that said to you, hey, you should think about this?
That was self-driven for me. But and there were really like no other options. I was lucky. Guelph Humber was actually like on the bottom of my list at first when I was applying to universities, but it was the only one whose campus I had to visit beforehand because of a like assessment that I needed to do to get into the program. There was a writing test and there was a interview. I went through the media studies and public relations program, and by going to the campus, I was like, oh, I could see myself here. So it was good that I had that kind of experience of going there because I was like, I can make this work compared to pretty much all the other universities I had where I didn't get to visit them, but I knew that they were the sprawling campus type, and I was nervous about that. But when I saw this alternative, I was like, I can do this. But nobody really told me to look for that. I just kind of knew I didn't think it existed. But when I saw it existed, I was like, I can make this work.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know it existed either. And it's
Mhm.
funny because, and when you're talking to the universities in terms of the accommodation that you need, at least at my experience was it's a very limited scope conversation because sure, you can get extra time to write your exams or space things out, but like the rest of the university experience is not really contemplated. Like I'm just thinking about me, driving. I went to Mac so I could stay home because I wasn't ready to navigate being living away from home, and I drove to their parking, and their parking was off site. So you'd have to take a shuttle from the parking to the drop off. And the shuttle buses there were a few seats, but it was often standing room with bars above that you'd have to hold on to, which I couldn't reach. And people actually, uh, although the seats are reserved for people who need them, like the number of times people wouldn't give up the seats, like it's crazy. I feel like anger boiling up inside me as I'm talking about this. And then like the traipsing across the campus, and then it's also the accessibility counselor that you talk about tells you like how much extra time you would need, like either it's
Mhm.
time and a half or double the time. And while in theory that may be sufficient, there's like this lack of consideration for the fact like we're still humans. Like,
Mhm.
how is giving me 6 hours to write an exam versus three helpful? Because now I got to write for 6 hours straight. Kind of inhumane, actually, but
Yeah.
you don't have an option, right?
Mhm.
It's a very black and white approach, and I'm
Yeah.
saying all of this to because people don't think about these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I had an epiphany a while ago, before, I think it was before I had the 33% strength, like stat available to me. I was like, I will never understand. No, it must have been after I had the 33% strength. I'm going to start this part again, so maybe you can edit this part.
Yeah.
I had an epiphany around when I got the 33% strength diagnosis that I will never know what it is like to live with 100% strength. And I was fine with that, I think. And then it also made me realize that I can't expect people to know what my life is like with 33% strength. And that gave me a sort of peace. But then I realized that is why it is so important that people listen to people with lived experience of
Yes.
disabilities and of so many different things, and why it is so important that we actually share our stories because of the fact that we can't expect people to know on either side what our lives is like. But when you listen and when you share, that is how you learn, and that is how you learn to make different decisions and build empathy as well for all the different nuances of life that people go through.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said. That's the exact importance, for why we need to share. And there has to be a willingness to learn too. Like, I don't know what your
Mm.
experience has been, but when I've gone to events and I've raised, I mean, I went to one and I've spoken about this a lot in Toronto in October, and it was not accessible. And when I raised it with the event coordinators who are between the ages of like 28 and 35. So you would think that they'd be, part of the woke generation, right? And it was not accessible like at all. Okay.
Mm.
And I raised it and they were angry with me for raising it.
Wow.
And I was really taken aback because I
Mm.
thought, how could, like, first of all, it was like, I could tell like it was a complete ego response and they went into defense mode. And then I had one
Mm.
of them say to me, well, I'm not discriminatory. I have a brother with a disability, which is
Mm.
also super offensive. Anybody
Yeah,
listening? And I
problematic.
was like, well, that actually makes this worse for you then. I can tell you that my brother, top of mind, would be thinking about accessibility issues, right? And they were really upset about it. And I thought, okay, this is a really important event for them. And they're probably embarrassed. So I gave it space and I
Mm.
handled it with grace. And they took my contact information and they said, we'll get in touch with you. So I didn't hear from them. So I waited a few weeks and I followed up, radio silence. And I
Mm.
thought, isn't that it's so disappointing, but it's
Mm.
also representative of the lack of importance organizations are putting on accessibility.
Mm. Mhm.
It's not part of the boxes that they tick when they're talking about
Mhm.
diversity and inclusivity. It's
Mhm.
really limited to race, gender issues, and accessibility's kind of been put in its own bucket, but it's
Mhm.
not top of importance for companies.
Which is really unfortunate because I say in my talks now all the time that disability is the largest minority and the only one that you can become a part of at any time, whether it's through age or through illness or through accident. Like people think accessibility is only for people who are currently in the disability community, and they don't see it as like something that could benefit them in the future, depending on how their life goes or how their life will inevitably go just because of age.
Yeah, I say the same thing. And we have an aging population too, right? So these
Mhm.
it's going to be crises eventually because all of these
Mhm.
people are going to need accommodations. So yeah, it is unfortunate and that's why we need to keep talking about it because at the end of the day, having accessibility for those who need it make life easier for those who don't.
I love that.
Like the mom who's got their wheeling their kid, right, in a
Mm.
stroller, being able to hit a button to open a
Mhm.
door, like that makes her life easier. And that's
Mhm.
just like basic accommodations. How have you found sort of breaking into this sphere? So maybe you can talk about, what your career path was like and how you've shifted.
So I ended up in a career that I never thought I would have and that I actively did not want when I was in university and when I even applied to the job. So I went to school for media and public relations. And as part of that degree, I had to do an event management class. And I was okay at the class, but I didn't love it. And I knew throughout the class that the one thing I didn't want to do when I graduated was events because there's a lot of time on your feet. There's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of running around. I didn't really think I could physically do an event when there was so much standing and walking and carrying things, and I had diminished strength. So, cut to I've graduated from university and I've been looking for a job for about a year. And I come across a posting for a public relations coordinator for a music festival, for a Bollywood music festival in Mississauga, where I live. And I thought, okay, well, I knew I didn't want to work at an event, but doing PR, like I want a PR job, maybe doing PR for an event wouldn't be as bad as actually running it. So I go through the whole application process and I hear back from them that they want to hire me for the other role that they are looking to hire for, which was event coordinator. So actually running the event. And I was like, oh no, this was not how this was supposed to go. But I had been looking for a job for a while, and the one they were offering was only a 4-month contract. So I thought, okay, I can do anything for 4 months. And I was kind of nervous about how the actual festival would go. But when I thought about it, that was going to be just like a couple days. And the rest of the 4-month contract, a lot of it was working from home because it was a small nonprofit that didn't have an office. And so I thought, okay, I don't have to commute every day to work, which was something that I was nervous about. I didn't drive at the time. I started driving just before I got the job, but was nervous about getting places and taking the bus and stuff. So I thought, okay, working from home, the festival, maybe it'll balance out. So I did the 4-month contract and then decided I loved it because it was really exciting. Being able to see like 30,000 people dancing and cheering for something that you had a part in, that was really cool. And proceeded to get renewed, get renewed, get renewed. Ended up staying there for 11 years in total before I finally pivoted and became an invisible disability speaker.
I love that. And it's so funny how you get caught on these hamster wheels, eh? You're like, I don't know, but this is what I want to do. And then you start
Yeah.
doing it, and then something, so what, something shifts it for you. So was the shifting it for you Speaker Slam? Was that the catalyst for you?
Yes, yeah. So the career switch was definitely, I actually did Speaker Slam not intending to be a speaker at all, which was very, like, I was kind of an anomaly for their usual audience. I really just wanted to kind of get used to talking about my disability and get more comfortable with it. And because I had seen the disability speakers who had previously done it and I'd been moved, I was like, that can be my reason for doing it. And then I did better than I thought, and I kept doing better than I thought. And when I became the #2 inspirational speaker of the year in 2023, I was like, maybe there is something here that I actually like can pursue. And so I was doing kind of starting up my speaking and my work at the festival at the same time, but realized as my speaking was starting to take off and I was getting more like excited and passionate and everything about it, I really had to kind of make a choice between what I was going to pursue, especially because with balancing the both of them, my whole thing is that I have less strength and stamina than the average person. So I really wanted to see if I was actually able to focus on the speaking career, how could I make that work and where else could it go? And so at the end of October of last year, I said goodbye to the festival after over 11 years and decided to jump into full-time speaking.
It's so funny. Our timelines are so similar because for me it was
So cool.
yeah, it was end of August last year.
Wow.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. What is it that people can expect to hear from you?
Yeah. So my main story is basically a message around owning who you are. And so I, of course, because I didn't talk about my disability for over 30 years, I was trying to hide it as much as I could, and I was kind of embarrassed by it. I first didn't know how to explain it to people. I didn't want to seem different. I just wanted to kind of like be normal and fit in. And then it was kind of through my relationship with my boyfriend that I was able to kind of talk about it more. And because I was always nervous to bring it up in a dating context, because when you're dating with an invisible disability, you don't really know when to bring it up or how people will receive it. And you know it'll impact them eventually, but you're not really sure how. So my boyfriend and I had talked for 2 months because we matched on a dating app over the pandemic lockdown. And I didn't bring it up. I wanted to mention it in person. And on our second date, he suggested that we climb a hill in a park to watch a sunset, which was super cute. But I hadn't really eaten a whole lot that day and we'd been drinking a little, but I didn't want to seem afraid of a challenge, even though I wasn't sure I could make it up this hill. And so we start going up the shortcut to the hill, which is like a steep, matted grass, kind of rocky path. And we get to the top of the hill, and I feel good. I'm like, I made it. I didn't blow my cover. But as we start walking, I start to feel kind of hot and dizzy. And I realized that I felt this way every time that I have fainted before. And so he noticed and luckily was like, hey, do you want to sit down by the side of a grass? And so I catch my breath and I'm like, this is embarrassing. Like, this is too, I'm going to have to bring it up to him after all. And so I started telling him about my disability, and I was really nervous that he would be scared off by it, but he seemed really moved. And he thanked me for sharing, and he said it reminded him of his own past insecurities that he had been afraid to share with people. And so I felt a lot of support there, and that was kind of what made me realize that like my big fear of telling people was somehow I thought, I don't know what I thought, that they would see me differently or that they would think of me differently in like a negative way. But because that didn't happen with him, and actually really has never happened, I don't know, things are always worse in our head, I think, than we kind of think they will be. I realized that when I actually share who I am and share this part of myself, it feels really liberating and feels really freeing. And I never really thought of that as an outcome before. Like I was scared to talk about it. I didn't think I would feel so much better after talking about it. So now my message in my story is kind of in my keynotes that we all have part of ourselves or part of our lives that we're afraid to share or be judged on. It could be a disability. It could be like a family or financial situation. It could be a hobby or something that we're into. There's always something that we're afraid to share. But it is through sharing it that we find our people to connect to and to relate to and find the people who will understand us.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I just did a podcast episode with Kyle Gray. I released it this week, and he said in the episode that what he realized along his journey was that as long as he was totally okay with who he was, then everybody else would be.
I love that.
It's like it's so simple, but it's so profound,
Yeah.
right? Because if you're not totally okay with who you are, then the result of that is you're not showing up in the world as authentically yourself. So the relationships that you develop are based on this role that you're playing. It's a projection. So exactly what you said, you find your people when you show up as you because authenticity is what attracts the right people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool how differently, like, I feel like now that I'm not putting energy into hiding part of myself, which I didn't realize how much energy I was even putting into that, how like much energy now you have to just like live and thrive. And like my friends have said that ever since I started talking about my disability, I started wearing brighter colors, which I feel like is a thing today. Then they were like, it's probably because you're not hiding anymore in general. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it makes such a big impact in your life to just own who you are and like acceptance.
It's so true because it is a real thing. It's so funny because I was just speaking with a friend about this, and like when I look back at the version of me that would go out with my friends or go to events, the level of hypervigilance that I had pre-planning every possible scenario, right? Like pivoting my next move based on whatever I would be facing there and like curating how I wanted to show up and not having control of the situation. Like it was exhausting. You're exactly right. Like to just go out to dinner with friends and not give an F about it, right? It's like it's so liberating.
It's so great. Yeah, I feel the same way. Like anytime I used to be super concerned about how I look, like getting up from a low chair or going up a flight of stairs or whatever, because it was visibly difficult. And it's still visibly difficult for me, but I care so much less because I'm like, it's out there. Like whether you know this about me already and are seeing me do it or have no idea, have just met me and are seeing me do it, I don't care anymore because it's out there. I'm not hiding anything anymore.
Yeah. And I think that that's what is so universally relatable. And that's why, I created this platform for us to talk about it because that concept is applicable to every single person. Right?
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether you have a disability or not, but it's the finding true acceptance of you and being more conscious about where you're putting your energy and you're not
Right.
wasting it on these unimportant things that we really do create in our head because most people are walking around like you and I just described. They're so caught up in their own their heads that they're not paying attention to what everybody's doing. And
Yeah, that's one of the things that I said in my Speaker Slam speech, was that I literally don't have energy to waste on unnecessary things that bring me down because I literally have less energy. And I feel like that framing really worked for me, and more people should think about like where they actually are putting their energy. Is it to something that is going to make them feel bad or negative, or something that is going to keep them going and that they will find more happiness in?
And I think that is the magic in living with a disability
Hmm.
is you are, because you have to be, more conscious about
Hmm.
where you expend your energy.
Yeah.
So you show up more deliberately because that's just your lived experience. And that's what helps us be able to talk about this universal message for other people, because I think we're so wired to be walking around in autopilot, right? And when the world isn't built for you, our autopilot, like, it looks very different, right?
Right. Yeah.
Got to be tapped in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So where can people find you? How can they connect with you, work with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Pretty much all my social media handles are Lauren Says Yay. And you can also find me online at laurensays.yay.com.
Okay, this is great. Thanks for having this chat with me, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you for joining me on the Hiding in Plain Sight podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review. Feedback and episode ideas help us reach more listeners. I would love to connect with you further. You can visit my website at lindseymazza.com and add me on Instagram at @the_Lindsey_Mazza. Until next time, keep sharing your stories and vulnerabilities, because one story at a time connects us all.